You are listening to the Season 2 finale of Paris: A State of Mind. For more great content between seasons, please join us on Patreon.
Welcome to Paris: A State of Mind. Join us as we talk about the good, the bad, the ins, the outs of property rentals and purchases in and around Paris. We'll have topics for renters, owners, and visitors, share questions we are regularly asked, and more. My name is Gail Boisclair of Perfectly Paris, and my co-host is Marie Pistinier of Loquim Paris. Be a part of it. Both of us are proud members of the SPLM, the first representative body of furnished rental professionals. Well, it is springtime in Paris again, and we are actually in the final episode of season 2. Isn't that right, Marie?
Yes, exactly. I can't believe we are already at the final episode and that we are already at season 2.
How did we get through 2 seasons? Oh my goodness. Oh, it seems like it's flowing by. And then we decided, for all our listeners, we decided, like we did at the end of season 1, we compiled a bunch of questions from our listeners, and we're going to answer them for you today. And just also a reminder, if you do have questions for us, please send them in. We love to answer your questions. And who knows, maybe it'll be a question that we can even do online with you as our guest if it's a really big episode and a big question, right?
Yes, it will be our pleasure to welcome you. So, should I shoot the first question for you, Gail?
Sure, Marie.
So, we had one of the questions that we know that a lot of people are asking when they contact us, which will be, how do you know which neighborhoods in Paris are safe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get that a lot as well too from people. They automatically assume, I think people automatically assume that the outlying areas of Paris are not safe and only the interior arrondissements are. And this is completely false because every area, every arrondissement of Paris has good and bad areas. Sometimes some districts are shocking because you're walking down a street that's really nice where the next street over is just horrible. So there are definitely good areas in all parts of the city, but the best thing to do is to do your research. You can ask friends that you know that have been to Paris and ask honest questions to the owner or the property manager because they'll tell you if you have certain concerns, like, for example, a single woman coming home at midnight, is it safe to walk from the metro station? That's a legitimate question, and people, the owner or the property manager should know the area and should be able to provide you an honest answer of if it's safe or not. You still have to keep in mind that Paris is a big city. And as with all big cities all over the world, there's always issues. And one of the big crimes that we have in Paris is pickpocketing. That usually happens, though, at metros or at tourist sites. And most of the crime that we do have in Paris is really non-violent crimes. It's really just people that want to take your money, take your handbag, take your wallet. So we always recommend for that taking with you at the beginning of the day only the things that you need, leaving extra money, credit cards, etc., in the apartment. Some of our guests use and renters use money belt. And one of the big things that I see when people walk around is I don't know how many times I've told people, like even French people, oh, your backpack is open or your handbag is open. I mean, kind of an invitation for a criminal just to reach in there. So you just have to keep your wits about you because you're still in a big city. On the metro, try to pay attention. Don't be like having your tablet out or your phone out too much because there's many stories where people will grab it right out of your hand. But anyway, getting back to the question, there are, like I said, good and bad areas in all parts of Paris.
Yeah, so you have to ask eventually your agent or the owners, even though they're supposed to give you an honest answer, but after we don't have all the same perception of the things. You can, of course, I guess, check on the expatriate groups online, for example. I guess I'm sure that on Facebook, and you can have you have many groups that you can contact before you commit in order to know how people feel those areas are.
Totally. I mean, since I've lived in Paris since 2001, I've always lived in the 18th arrondissement. And you hear all kinds of stories. You hear good and you hear bad. I tell you, no one has ever taken my wallet, robbed me on the street or in the metro and so on and so forth. But why? I'm from a big city, so I do have big city eyes, and that's all. You just have to be smart. But on to bigger and better things. I have a question for you, Marie. In fact, I've got several. Again, all from our listeners. So, as a tenant, a renter, can the owner end my lease anytime he or she wants?
No, absolutely not. You do have a lease, so you have to really check carefully when you sign and when eventually you get a notice. You are going to have to check your lease. If it's a type of secondary home lease, then the date on your lease will be the date of the termination of the lease. So the owner cannot terminate the lease before the final date which is on the lease. But those type of contracts in Paris, but you can have that all over France, but in Paris are rare. But this would be like a final answer. Like if you have a secondary home lease, or for example, like a company lease, it's just the same type of lease. Then the lease ends when it says so on the thing. Unless it's renewable, then you have to check the little lines. If it's an unfurnished place, you have a 3-year lease, so the owner can terminate it. At least the last minute he can do so would be 6 months before the anniversary of the lease. So it's not a yearly anniversary, it's a 3-year anniversary. So
Mhm.
if the lease was just renewed, the owner cannot terminate it, even though he's selling the place or he wants to be reinstalling it. It's not possible. We can talk about this situation. And if it's a furnished place and you have a 1-year lease renewable, then it will be 3 months before the anniversary of the lease as well. So, but this is a yearly risk or chance to have the lease terminated, whether you're on the owner side or on the tenant side. If it's a mobility lease or like a student lease, then it will be as a secondary home lease. Like your lease ends at the date of the termination of the lease mentioned on the contract. So there is no notice upfront from on the owner side. On the tenant, I remember that you can always terminate your lease with 1 month's notice, whatever type of lease you can have. And one of the thing to consider is that if the owner wants to terminate the lease, he does have to justify it. It cannot be just because you talk to him with cursing, for example. It has to be. It can be because you don't pay the rent, for example, but this has to go through a full process. So it's not just I'm sending you one letter and then it's the end and then you have to move out. It has to be whether the owner is willing to sell it, for example. So he can sell it if he follow the notice to evict you from the place. So then, if it's a furnished lease, you don't have any priority on the purchase, but you just have the notice, and then you have to vacate. If it's an unfurnished place, then you do have to you have a priority and the possibility to purchase it, but there is a full process. We can go through that another time. Or the owner can say that it's because he wants to come back to his place to live in or to have one of his relatives, like it can be his parents or his daughter, sister. I think that on the close family. But then he has to justify it and say, okay, I want to go back to my apartment, and this has to be justified. It cannot be just because he has a I don't know, he doesn't like your haircut, for example. This is it has to be justified every time.
So, what if, for example, and I actually know a real life example, it's happened to one of our listeners, not property I manage or anything, but what if an owner says that they're not going to renew the lease because they're going to take over the apartment personally? However, the renter has then found the apartment they're renting advertising for a long term renter on another website.
So this is a trick thing because so first I would suggest the tenant to verify that the apartment on the other website is actually on the market.
It is. They called the agency, and the agency said yes, it was.
Okay, so this is the first thing because you may have a property advertised on some other website, and actually the agent may not have the full management, and maybe it's like an old thing. So if the agency said yes, then I think that they can the tenant can sue the owners. And they can have some probably refund, or eventually I don't know if they can go up to reinstall them in the apartment, but it can it's definitely not fair. I would advise to make some screen print screen copy, eventually pass through an USCA in order to make to have an official things to verify that the apartment is actually on the market. And then you have to go either on the commission mediation. You know, we talked about that in the episode 24 about the conciliation commission, where you can eventually dispute and argue about an issue with your owners. And you can definitely go to maybe that go maybe you don't have to go up to the court, but it's something that definitely it's not fair, and it's not
Totally not fair.
and it's not by the law.
And this person that I know, she's a friend. I know her personally. She's a really good friend of another friend. And I know for a fact that she's a good tenant. I've been into the apartment. I've also been into the apartment when there's been issues not related to her, but leaks that she'd had to deal with on the owner's behalf. She's a really good tenant. But, having said all of that, who wants to stay after all of that in an apartment that somebody doesn't want them in anymore? Which, that's kind of an uncomfortable position too.
Yeah, the question is that does she wants to argue and eventually get a compensation because she had to find another place, maybe to pay some agency fees. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have the exact answer, but maybe she has to take some advice. Maybe she can consult an advisor or a lawyer to know what can be done. Because the question is that what was the motive and what was the interest of the owners? Was he able to raise the price after she left? Was he arguing with the tenant? Maybe he wanted.
Didn't even have an argument. They didn't even have an argument. The property was managed by another agency. He stopped working with that other agency and asked for all the keys back. The agency wasn't me, again. And then shortly thereafter, he sent notice to the renter saying that he was taking back the apartment for his own personal use. And that's when she found it later on, and she contacted the other agency, publicized on another site. Yeah. Anyway, she listens to our podcast. So I'll just make sure, I'll give her a heads up to listen to this one.
Exactly.
So I have another question because that one probably went on too long. Can the owner or manager, property manager, pop into the apartment whenever they want?
No, they can't. Once you are in your place, it's your place. They cannot enter with the keys without your authorization, and they cannot say, "Okay, I'm going to be there. I'd like to pass by the apartment." It has to have a motive or reason, unless you are very friends with your owners, which happens sometimes, luckily. But they need to have a reason. Sometimes owners, when I manage their flat, they said, "Okay, can I put in the lease that I'd like to pass by like once in a year in order to just check the apartment, and if it's fine, then I will renew the lease." Especially when people used to have like secondary home lease that without any renewal. And this is not legal. You cannot say to the person, "I'm going to just check, and if it's not clean, for example, I will not renew the lease." Because in fact, once you are in your apartment, if you want to be like a little pig, as we say in France, you can actually. It's your place. You have some dues and duties in order to give the place back in good condition and good shape. But basically, when the owners comes in, it has to have a reason, or you ask for him or her to come in. But he cannot force you to welcome him unless there is some renovation to do or some emergency. And this is another topic that we talked about in our episode 24, actually.
If you're enjoying this episode of Paris, A State of Mind, You may also be interested in our sister podcast, Don't Miss This. Join Jennifer weekly for the scoop on what's happening in Paris. Paris, a State of Mind will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now back to Paris, a State of Mind. And can the owner or property manager, can they hang on to a set of my keys?
Yes and no. Actually, when you have a place that you book directly with the owner, you are supposed to have all the sets of keys, and the owner do have nothing. Like you are in your place, and he doesn't have to have unless you authorize him. Like for example, if he suggests that he can keep a set of keys because if there is an emergency because he's living not very far, then why not? But you are not forced to accept. You can just say no. The keys are mine. If there is a property manager in between, then the property manager is entitled to have a set of keys in order to, because he's the manager and he can need access for emergency, for example, and everything. But it's the only reason why flat managers do have the keys. And as a flat manager, I would say that sometimes it's very convenient, especially when you lock yourself out
Oh, I've had
or when you lose your keys or when it's like on a Sunday or like on a Saturday and there is a leak and the agent wants to send over a plumber and you are not there because you are on a break. Sometimes it's good to have a flat managers who can keep a set of keys.
yeah. No, I always keep a set. And I've had all of those situations. I've had people lock themselves out and they've had to come by and pick up my set of keys and whatever. Yeah. It's important. I even have, though, for me, I always make sure that a friend has a set of keys to my place because what if I lock myself out?
Yeah,
I'm always
exactly.
afraid I'm going to lock myself out. And I do.
Or you lose your keys and yeah, and it's a weekend and you don't have a. It's I usually love to have someone else to have my keys as well.
And that brings me to the next question. Speaking of keys, what if I lose my keys and I have to have the locks changed? Is it me that pays for this, or is it the owner that pays for this?
So I had exactly this. The issue is one of our tenants. The poor guy. Someone probably stole his keys or his bag, and inside there was his address. So not only he lose the keys, but then he comes back home. He has been robbed. His computer, iPad, and like a tablet and everything were taken. And so of course, as the keys were, it's not like people coming in and breaking the door. They entered the apartment with the keys, so they didn't did any noise or neither. So anyway,
Mhm.
so of course the tenant has to change the locks, and in fact, it's supposed to be the tenant insurance who is going to take care of the change of the locks in case there is like an issue. But to buy for the for my tenant, because when he booked his home insurance, the multi-risk home insurance, and we have two episodes about insurances in France, he booked it for like the classical multi-risk habitation, like the fire, water, explosion. But he didn't want it to get the one which cover him for the theft.
Oh,
So the insurance said, okay, you've been robbed with the keys directly and everything, so we are not going to reimburse you for anything. And so, no, the keys are not, so the owner is not going to pay for this either because the owner is not responsible for the loss of the keys, and he's not responsible for for the trouble. So no, if you lose your keys, not only you are entitled to change the locks, but and you will also have to provide back the keys. We have that often. If you change your locks, usually you are going to have a new set of keys. So sometimes it's 4 or 5. It depends on the type of lock you have, and you have also to provide back to the owners or the flat manager the number of keys they had. And especially if you lost the keys with eventually Vigic, which is like the little device that
bad.
helps you to the badge, which help you to check in and out, then of course you will have to repay for the new one.
Well, people should go back and listen then to episode 13 and episode 14 where we talk about insurance. And off topic about that, do credit checks exist in France? Where people check, your background, if you have outstanding debts, all these, you know what I'm talking about when I say a credit check?
Yeah, but I think that it's probably a question from someone from North America who asked you that.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, because this is we don't have like, I think that you call that like score credit or something like that, credit scoring, something
Right?
like that. And this is actually not existing in France, and I think that in Europe we don't have any system working this way. We usually, you go to a bank, so of course they have a record of what you've been doing, and you can actually, if you have been in trouble with a lot of debt and everything, they will have all the information to check this. But there is not such things as credit checks. You may, if you are like a North American people who wants to purchase in France, for example, I guess that probably if you find a bank which branch is related to you North American banks, eventually probably you may discuss with your chargé de clientèle, the guy at the managing your account. But I don't even know if they can actually do that. Just like
Yeah.
just singing out loud, like because it's really something that is. I know that I have a friend who is living in New York, and who I know that he increases his scoring year after year, and I know that this is completely out of our way to do in France, and our way to think.
Well, that could be good for some people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and what about you see it not only for France but for Italy and some other countries. You see these amazing offers. Move to somewhere in France and buy this chateau for next to nothing. Is that possible? And is it a good idea? What are the pros and cons about it?
So it's I think that we should at one point make a full episode of that. It's very interesting because yes, we have this kind of thing in France. You can have chateau, you can have like hotel particulier, you can have old mansions, like places with really an historical background, and like which is actually checked on many documents and historical books and everything. It could be not that expensive when you compare the price per square meters, plus eventually the gardens and everything. But this comes also with inconvenient, or at least like a contraint, like a thing that you have to follow up, inconvenience that will go with that. Like for example, if your place, the place you'd like to purchase, is really classified as an historical monument or bâtiment, or like something like that, then you cannot do whatever you want. Like you have, when it comes to renovation, when it comes, you have to follow things by the books. So you may gain also one of the pros thing, like you may get some additional money from the state in order to help you maintain the building, but you have to also to bring a lot of money on your own when you have to do such renovation. And we heard a lot about a little castle where people are doing like open days, like where you can view them, you can visit them, so you can put some money to buy a ticket. So and the money is going to help them to renovate this portion of this portion. And you cannot, for example, if you want to like destroy a part of the castle in order to put like a very modern and design things, it's not possible as well. Like you cannot shake everything up just with your taste. So it's interesting because you can actually have some nice space, and you have all the usually we are talking about people who love France and history and everything, but you do have to take into consideration that you cannot do whatever you want inside. There is this funny thing that someone who purchased like an historical, it was like it's an old church, so it's actually not the state who sold it. It's like it's the church. And so the guy was, so it's very nice. And so the guy was thinking, okay, I'm going to do a swimming pool, because actually the monument was not like an historical monument. So I said, okay, I'm going to dig into the garden, and then we're going to do a swimming pool. And so the guy started to, to dig and to get rid of the, how do you say that, like the la terre, and
Dirt
the
and
dirt and everything. And then what does he found? He found skeletons.
I was just gonna say a body.
But not one, many, like skulls, and like many. And in fact, so they realized that it was an ancient cemetery like it was like first commune, like where they put like people who didn't have any family or related, like everyone was like on the same thing. So, and so the guy is really frustrating because he cannot do anything. Now the question of the swimming pool is out. It's not possible. So, so yes, sometimes you can have some surprise, not always interesting one.
Yeah, not always good ones. Well, this is a big one because it happens all the time. And you know, from recording these episodes from me, there's always work being done in my building because this is where all the trainees from all over France come to practice their drilling skills. They come to my building because there is always work. So, there's work being done in the building, and sometimes it might drive me crazy. So, can I ask for a discount on the rent, even if like there's scaffolding? Like, what if there's scaffolding in front of my windows? Or what if also, to add to this, what if it's not simply my building, but maybe the building next door? But I'm being bothered. And especially in a time where more and more people work from home, what kind of compensation, if any, can I have?
So not much, I'm afraid. So first, if it's a building next door, if it's not even your building, so you cannot ask anything, like unless you can go and, and scream at the workers in order to have them stop, or you can eventually ask the syndic to ask the syndic next door what is happening, especially in your place where we have like this kind of training, people are just training with drilling right right next to your place. But no, if there is work in your building or in your apartment, it has to be, for example, if it's a scaffolding or thing like that, usually it's we don't have the choice. It's done. It's like it's a work done by the all the owners who paid and accepted. For example, the renovation of the facade, and this is a fact, and then you cannot do anything. If it's a work that is done in your apartment because there is any issue in your apartment, and for example, or for the building, but which has to go through your apartment, for example, they change the pipes or they change the video phone or intercom, things like that. If the work is done for more than 21 days, then you are entitled to have a reduction on your rent and you can ask for that. But below this time frame, there is unfortunately nothing we can do. And you do have to let the guy come in and do the work. You cannot just say, no, I don't want to have people, strangers in my place and everything. But I think that people can check the episode 24 in order to have more information on that.
Yes, exactly. We talked about that. Well, I think for me, that was a great bunch of questions, 8 questions we compiled from all of our wonderful, wonderful listeners. And this is our end to season 2. And wow, 2 seasons
Two
done
seasons,
and
yes.
dusted.
Very very glad. I didn't see when we started that. I didn't know that we were going to be able to do to season, and I think that we have already a lot of question and topic for the season 3. So we can't wait for this, and feel free to shoot your your questions, to send your questions, and we'll try to do our best to answer. And if it's not us, we will have some guests in order to make sure that you have all the answers you deserve.
Exactly. We love having special guests from time to time asking special questions. But what we love even more is all of our listeners out there and all of the support that you've given Paris A State of Mind for these 2 episodes. We look forward to season 3 and having more interesting topics for you. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And as well, shout out to Paris Underground Radio producer Jennifer Garrity for all of her support and being a fabulous producer.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Marie.
So see you for season 3.
See you in the next season. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks for listening to Paris A State of Mind, featuring Gail of Perfectly Paris and Marie of Lokim, both who are founding members of the SPLM. Paris A State of Mind is produced by Paris Underground Radio. The music, Jazz in Paris, is by Media Right Productions. For more information on this show and others, go to parisundergroundradio.com.
This episode of Paris A State of Mind was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.